Hello and welcome to EB Knits. My name is Emily. I'm a knitter and making enthusiast based in Orlando, Florida, and this channel is my outlet to share all things handmade, mostly knitting, and today I'm going to be sharing with you my final finished object of 2022. It is the Throwover by Andrea Mowry, and I did not expect to finish this by the end of the year, but I did. I haven't styled it yet, I haven't worn it out in public yet, but I am excited to do so soon, and when I do, I will insert some video so that you can see it in all its glory as well. So overall, this top, again, is a Throwover by Andrea Mowry. The yarn I used was Knit Picks Wool and Cotton, as in the bare natural color, and then I used a mini set from Stress Knits. It was in 2021 I purchased it. She was doing a mini set with the inspiration from certain flowers, and this was the zinnia set. I just thought it was so pretty. I've been calling this my watermelon Throwover. I don't know if the colors are picking up on camera. It's a little bit like yellowy, limey green with a coral and then a darker red. It just reminds me of the colors in watermelon, so hence my watermelon Throwover. I did make a couple of modifications to this pattern though. Well, first, as you can see, it's short sleeve. I do live in Florida and I don't really wear my long sleeve sweaters or cardigans that much, so I want to knit something that I will wear. And next, I hacked the pattern. So this pattern is supposed to be worsted weight. I knit it in DK, so I made the size 5, but I was going for a size 3. I have about a 40-inch chest, and I think ultimately it worked out. Well, I feel like the collar is kind of high. I could have done for less ribbing, and I think I didn't need as much depth in the yoke. Like even an inch less, I would have been okay with, and then I would have had a little bit more in the body, I feel like. But what's done is done, and it's all good. In 2022, I got, they're not barber cords, they're knit keeper cords from the Blue U on Etsy, and they were super fantastic. I always thought, hey, I'm fine with just using scrap yarn and trying on projects, but these were like a step up in terms of putting on your needles, and it was just so much easier. So I really liked that. These were a big help as I was knitting the project. Okay, so let's talk about the pattern from top to bottom. So gauge swatch. I didn't do one, which was risky, especially given that the pattern is a worsted weight yarn and I'm using DK. But honestly, I didn't feel like it. And secondly, I don't have much success with my gauge swatches. So most of the time, I think it's because it is such a small circumference that I'm knitting or just a small project I'm knitting on. My gauge swatch, even when I gauge swatch in the round, is tighter than my finished project. So I have measured, I have compared, and I find that my gauge swatch is mostly always tighter than my final object is. So knowing that with my gauge swatch, I will usually change my needle size and I'll decrease my needle size by half of a size from the gauge swatch, so that way it allows me to be a looser knitter, because I apparently am when I'm knitting bigger projects. So basically with that information, I just didn't gauge swatch. I just kind of winged it based on, I looked at past projects I've knit in DK weight yarn and looked at the needle recommendations for this yarn that it called for, and I just went for it. Don't recommend, don't do that. I don't want to be the reason your sweater doesn't turn out, but that's what I did for this one. So then when we actually went to cast on, let's see if I can tell you. So I ended up using 3.75 millimeters for the body and 2.75 millimeters for the ribbing. So I cast on with a tubular cast on. I know some people are lovers and haters of tubular, but I'm a massive fan. I love it. So this is tubular cast on, and then the other modification I made was I did 1x1 ribbing. The pattern calls for 2x2. The reason I made this difference or this modification was because for tubular cast on, which I love, so it was worth it to me, I didn't want to deal with switching the stitches to get the 1x1 tubular cast on to become a 2x2 cast on, and didn't want to do the work. And I've never done it before. I didn't know how it would look, especially in white yarn. I think any errors would stand out. So I stuck with what I knew, which is 1x1 tubular cast on with 1x1 rib. So that's what I went for here. I followed the pattern everywhere else though. So for the color work, this is another concern I had as I was knitting. Turns out there's several spots where it's 3-color work, which I've never done, I don't think, or I did it in one project we ended up ripping out. So don't have a lot of experience with 3-color color work, but I got through it and it was really beautiful. I liked seeing the colors come together. Also, gauge swatch would have helped with this. So the Stress Knits yarn is, even though they're both DK, it's definitely lighter weight than this Knit Picks yarn. So the difference in like gauge or density of my fabric is obvious when you're looking really close. Now that it's done and I have it on, like, I don't mind it at all, but when I was knitting it, it's something that I took definitely days, maybe weeks to kind of go back and forth on if I wanted to reknit this. But I said, no, it was 3-color color work. I don't want to go back. What's done is done. For my next one, I'll have that information for my future color work experiences. But yeah, so if I gauge swatch, I would have found that out and could have done something about it, whether that be hold the Stress Knits yarn double so it is more of a dense fabric like the Knit Picks is, or something else. I did go up a needle size for my color work because, again, I'm not a very experienced color work knitter, and most people knit color work tight, and I didn't know if that would be me, so I went up a needle size. Again, that's something I could have changed if I did a gauge swatch or knew about. Because maybe that also definitely didn't help with the density and of the fabric that I made. But overall, again, it's fine. I'm not going to change it now. It worked out in the end, but that's something I deliberated on for a while. So moving on from the color work, the rest is just simply stockinette. I did about I don't know if it's an inch or inch and a half of ribbing on the arms, and the bottom here is probably a good 3 inches, if not more, of ribbing at the bottom. Because the collar up here is somewhere between 2 and 3 inches, I felt like it was, you know, a long or a lot amount of ribbing, and I wanted the other ribbing that I had to kind of mirror that. So it's a little bit more ribbing than I would normally do in a sleeve, and more ribbing than I would normally do on the bottom of a sweater, but I think it all just connects. And I really like that aspect of the sweater. It hits just below my natural waist, basically to my belly button. And there are some short rows in this pattern. I did German short rows. She calls for wrap and turn short rows. I did German short rows because I love German short rows. They're so easy, and I didn't want to bother with wrap and turns. So I think that was absolutely fine. I don't really see a reason why not to ever substitute German for the other kind, but you know, there's probably a reason, but I love German short rows. For my cast off or bind off, I did the Italian sewn bind off. So I didn't do tubular. I think tubular is a little bit thicker than necessary, and I just think an Italian bind off saves a couple of steps from tubular bind off. So yeah, the key is to do it really loosely, very, very loosely. I have learned this lesson many a time by redoing it over and over, but I think now I've got the groove, and again, just the effect that it gives of almost into nothing. There's no real like strong line of the sweater beginning or ending, if that makes sense. Like, hopefully fellow knitters will get what I'm saying, but I just think it's beautiful. So I love tubular bind off or Italian bind off and tubular cast-ons. It's what I will do for almost everything. This fit the bill for, well, not the yoke part, but the rest of the sweater fit the bill for the mindless stockinette project that I have been looking for all year long. So I did do a lot of reading while I was knitting the stockinette portion, and exactly what I was looking for. Of course, the tubular bind off takes time, and I had to focus on that, and the bind off of the sweater did take me about an hour. I timed myself, but again, so worth it. I have blocked this already, and I didn't really pin it out or stretch it. I just blocked it with wool wash and let it sit out to dry. Overall, I really like it. This is my first ever Andrea Mowry pattern, actually, and oh my gracious, I can't recommend it enough. I just think her pattern was so clear, so much information, notes, added tidbits. I really liked it. I really have grown, I think, throughout 2022 into really liking Andrea Mowry, not just this pattern, but I love the time she takes in her podcast on Knit If I Want To, and sharing her designer tips and information and all her knitting expertise. So I'm a big Andrea Mowry fan, and I will definitely continue to knit her patterns. This is the first of many for me. I can tell you that already. Overall, I'm very excited about this top. I used all the yarn I had, not for the color work, but for the body. I did not expect to run out of yarn, but I just knit until I ran out, and I didn't want to add more color on the bottom. I wanted to keep the body after the color work all one color, so I just bound off, and it's okay. It's a little bit, maybe an inch more cropped than I would have liked. And if it really bothers me, I will go back and fix it because I want to wear it more, but I think it'll be good with my high-waisted jeans or shorts or pants, which is what I basically wear these days. So I think we'll be fine. If we're not, I'll fix it later. But for now, I'm really excited about this top. Thank you for listening. I, again, highly recommend Andrea Mowry's patterns. If you liked this video, I have an entire playlist of all my finished objects throughout the years, so take a look at those, and I will catch you in the next video, friends. Happy making!